A friend of mine recently asked what website I use to make macros. Honestly, I don't think there is a really good website that just goes over all of the macros and everything you can do other than like WowWiki. Yeah, but a lot of people ask me about macros and stuff, and they're like, hey, how do you do this, and how do you do this? And basically, to make a macro, you start over here, hit your little macro thing, and you come in here, you have general, which are shared amongst all of your tunes. Most of the time, you're going to want to make specific macros, though, because every class is different, unless you have, I guess, multiple of the same classes, but nobody does that. I have tons of macros. I use macros for everything. So let's create a macro. Keep this as simple as possible. New. You can name it whatever you want, whatever reminds you of whatever that spell is, or the rotation. If you don't like letters, you can just put a period, or you can be like me and just put like the first few letters. So let's call this one Sal. Salvation. You can really put a picture on it. There's millions of pictures you can choose from. There's so many. It's like not even funny. But if you just go with the default question mark, it'll actually change the icon. Depending upon what you have typed here, it'll look like the spell you're casting. So I always go with the question mark. So what we're going to do is /tooltip. Basically all that does is when you, after you make the macro, and if you don't have this on here and you cursor over it, it'll say whatever the name of the macro is. So it'll say Sal. Whoop-de-doo. With show tooltip, it'll actually show, when you cursor over it, it'll say, oh, and this is what this spell does. Neat. So cast salvation, hand of salvation. And I don't want to spell it wrong, so I'm just going to click it in. Hand of Salvation. And then at the bottom, we're going to have the UI error script, because I like putting that on all of them. Also, without the UI script, you sit here and spam the button a whole bunch, and you get this error bullshit up here. It's like, error, sorry, you cannot cast, you cannot cast, you cannot cast. If you're like me, and you like to spam buttons, now you take it, and you put it down here on your bar. Now you can cast it, and it works fine. To get into stuff a little bit more complicated, I mean, because guess what? Macros are complicated as hell. Okay, so now we're standing out in the field. We have my tanking macro. So, of course, show tooltip, so that way I can cursor over it and see what spell I'm trying to cast, even though I know which spell I'm trying to cast. And then /start attack. So all I have to do is hit my 1 key here, and whatever's in front of me will become my target, and I will start attacking it. Yeah, isn't that fucking awesome? Now I'm gonna die. Cast sequence. Let's go over that. Cast sequence macros are pretty darn simple. Basically, let's say you have a spell that you want to cast a whole shit ton of times, or a spell that you want to use in a sequence, like it suggests. Cast sequence. Blam. You put in your tooltip. Cast sequence. Now you put in your spells. Cast sequence space. Now you put in your spells. What do you want to put in? Well, let's make this a fucking buff one, because hey, I'm a paladin and I buff the shit out of myself. So let's try some king. So it's kings. Blam. Comma. Blessing of Kings, comma. Now you can put a space in, or you can leave the space out, depending upon how much room you have. I'm going to put the spaces in, just because I do. Oh, okay, so yeah, here's your Blessing of Kings. What else do you buff yourself with? Well, I'm a tank, so I use Righteous Fury, comma, space. Blessing of King, Righteous Fury. I also am going to use Seal of Insight for, like, rating, comma, space. And what else? Oh, shit, let's put in my buff food, too. So, blam, now I have food. So, after all that's done, you take your buff, put it down here on your bar, close your macro window. Blam. Now, Kings, Righteous Fury, Seal of Insight, and my buff food, and then the macro restarts. However, this isn't necessarily the best, because say you buff everyone with Blessing of Kings, well now it's going to sit on Righteous Fury and it's going to wait. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a reset. Reset equals, 10 seconds maybe? Now, when I say, alright, start the raid up, I buff everybody with Kings, I wait 10 seconds, and my macro will automatically reset from Righteous Fury back to Kings. So the next time I go to click on it, it's freaking Kings again. Anyways, the important part of this macro, none of this shit's really important. It's just my cast sequence and my reset. But this part here, the cast consecrate, this is what I call the always cast spell. Basically, when you have you create your macro, and after you get your cast sequence and your reset and all this stuff done with, that's your spamming macro. You press enter, and the very next line, cast consecrate. This spell is your one you always want up. Sometimes people will put like Avenger Shield to that because they want to cast it every time, but I like using that as an opener. I don't want it to be just cast randomly. So to see how this works, I press my 1 key, something comes over to fight me, and whenever consecrate is up, as you can see, my consecrate spell is available to be used. As I'm spamming my 1 key, consecrate just goes off automatically. Even though I didn't press anything, all I'm doing is spamming the 1 key. It's going through my rotation. And when consecrate is up again, boom, it just goes off again. This is important for tanking paladins. Not necessarily for everyone, but other classes might want to use this in other ways. You can use, rather than consecrate, you can use it for cooldowns. Like say if you're an engineer, you want your gloves with the synapsis thing that increases your haste, you can put that in there. And so that way it's always going off as long as you're spamming these macros. It's just useful little things that I've picked up. Okay, also as a reset, if you want to use, you can use a reset of target. Meaning every time you switch targets, it will automatically change. So I target myself, buff myself with Kings, woohoo, target something else, the macro is a reset. Pretty darn cool. Of course, you don't need to use this on like a buffing macro, but like say rogues who need to build combo points on each target, they're going to want to use something like that or something similar, so that way they can build combo points on something, and if it dies before their macro is completed, they can literally switch to another target and it will start building combo points again. Situational macros. Good times. A situational macro would be a macro that only happens when you press a specific button. Like, you see my bar looks perfectly normal, everything, nothing moves, nothing. When you push the shift key, stuff changes. Over here, this button is my all-in-one macro for my professions. I press the shift key, it looks normal. Let's just pull this fucker up. Okay, show tooltip, of course. Use, and the situational is in parentheses. So basically, mod control, mod shift. This looks complicated as hell, but it's really not. Mod control, mod shift, cooking fire, mod control, mod alt, first aid. Holy shit. It just looks like a confangled mess. But come over here, and it's marked prof. So you know it's professions. You cursor over it, it says blacksmith. Whoop-de-doo. You can pull that up. That's real awesome. Hold down shift and it becomes smelting. Oh, nice. So here's all your smelting. But You want it to do more than that. You hold down Alt and it becomes archaeology. I can pull up all of my archaeology shit. Oh, that's pretty freaking awesome. You're like, oh, but it does more still. Hold down Alt and Control, it becomes first aid. You can look at your first aid. Hold down just Control and it's cooking. Hold down Control and Shift and it becomes a cooking fire. You click on it, you can make a cooking fire. Yeah, so freaking cool. So basically, it's an all-in-one profession macro. You can do everything using this one button. Situational macros are pretty friggin' awesome, especially for rogues because it makes shit really useful. Rogues do lots of situational stuff. Like, alright, here's this poor little crater that I'm gonna kill. But my normal macro that I would normally use in my one slot, where you at? It's called the combo. Here it is. In this macro, the very beginning, cast stealth. With this situational macro, it will cast stealth. It will stealth me when I am not stealthed or when I'm not in combat. So, basically, since everything you want to do as a rogue will involve you being in stealth, my 1 and 2 button are both stealthing me. And I can sneak over, and I can do my cheap shot, or whatever it is I need to do to kill this demon. Now that it's dead, I'm out of combat, I'm out of stealth, it automatically becomes stealth again. However, if I fight something that doesn't die instantly, you'll see that it becomes my regular rotation. I cast my abilities. I can kill this mob by spamming 1 or 2 buttons, and it becomes stealth again. This is my Goblin Engineer. Engineers have the ability to use a glider. You can attach it to your cloak, and you can use it like every 2 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever. Well, on top of that, I made a macro that uses my glider when I jump off something and also casts camouflage, so I become the stealth bomber. And it's pretty useful. I've used it for getting away from enemies and getting away from being ganked. It's pretty nice, but other than that, it doesn't really serve much of a purpose. Also, another really cool macro that I've created in my general tab, because I use it on different tunes, mounting. When I get on a mount, a flying mount or ground mount, over here, the buttons are the same. They look the same, but it randomly gives me a different mount. So, I want my flyer, gives me a flaming hippogriff, or my cloud, or my black dragon, or my twilight dragon, and it just keeps going. It just keeps giving me random mounts until I'm done. So, yeah, I mean, and you can do the same with ground mounts. If your tune is too low level in order to use flying mounts, then you can put your little ground mounts on there. And like, oh, I don't want to use that mount. I want to use this mount. That's the same goddamn mount. I want to use a different mount. Yeah, I'm so freaking cool. Rawr. But now you know everything I know about macros, and obviously I don't know everything because, you know, I've only learned what I needed to know. But yeah, there you go. And this has been Joe's tutorial on how to use macros.